All of it could have been avoided if Joe Biden decided that the United States would take control of Kabul instead of the Taliban. His decision was to trust the Taliban over the United States military. And what has happened over the course of the last 2.5 weeks has been a result of that decision. This is fascinating. If you haven't, if you got the Wall Street or the Washington Post, go ahead and read this article, but I'm going to get into it really quick right here. Both countries, they're talking about Afghanistan and the United States, those who had dedicated themselves to keeping the extremist group out of power through the decades of violent insurgency, agreed on one thing. Had it not been for a few fateful choices that Sunday in mid-August, they're talking about the Sunday in which the Taliban took Kabul, it could have gone very differently. A spur-of-the-moment decision by the president to escape the country based on apparently incorrect information supplied by his advisors was the most consequential. Later, the United States had one last chance to challenge Taliban supremacy in Kabul, but opted to focus squarely on getting people out through the airport. Again, this is a report from the Washington Post. Before the fall, Ghani, president of Afghanistan, former president of Afghanistan, former now because he fled, Ghani told aides that Afghan forces could hold off the Taliban in the wake of the American departure and that the government needed just 6 months to turn the situation around, according to a former Afghan official. Even as the Taliban attacks intensified in rural Afghanistan and the provincial capitals, his confidence remained unshaken. The president of Afghanistan was telling the United States and the world and the Afghan people and the Afghan military, no, we got this. We got this. Problem with the United States is, unlike when Ronald Reagan was in office, remember the whole trust but verify, we trusted them, didn't verify. As the Taliban continued to accumulate gains, American officials began to see the president's confidence as delusion. Ghani's lack of focus on the threat of the Taliban posed mystified U.S. officials. In a July meeting with Ghani in Kabul, two men told the Afghan president that his team needed to be realistic about defending the country and must drop the idea of defending all 34 provincial capitals, said an official familiar with the meeting. They had focused on what they could defend. They had to focus on what they could actually defend, said the official. All the provinces are important, but there was something integral about the defense of Kabul. Ghani appeared to agree, but there would be no follow-through, the U.S. official said. Ghani would want to talk about digitizing the economy, said another official, referring to the president's plan for the government's salary payment system. It had nothing to do with the dire threat. Essentially, the United States went in and said, hey, you've got to focus on defending Kabul. President Ghani, Afghan President Ghani, basically said that, well, no, we're going to defend everywhere. Everything's going to be totally fine. The provincial capitals are going to be totally fine. That wasn't the case. The Taliban were moving across Afghanistan with the United States pullout, and they were losing provincial capital after provincial capital. All of the provinces in rural Afghanistan were gone. The United States officials said, you need to focus on defending Kabul. Ghani said, oh yeah, totally, we'll do that. And according to people close to Ghani, he wasn't focused on that at all. So let's jump to that Saturday before the Sunday in which the Taliban overtook Kabul. As late as the Saturday afternoon before Kabul fell, Ghani did not suggest any urgency around department arrangements or the safety of senior staff. The Americans, meanwhile, were suffering from their own delusions. Again, this is the failings of the Biden administration and their intelligence regarding the entire situation in Afghanistan. In June, U.S. intelligence agencies had assessed the Afghan government would hang on for at least another 6 months, which again was not true. So either they got it wrong and someone should resign, or they knew what was happening And the information passed up along the chain was, no, they'll be fine for 6 months, and it was a lie. And then they should resign. In no situation should anybody not resign here. We'll get to it a little bit later, but there's been one person that's been fired over this. One person. And that one person was fired because he was criticizing the administration and wanted them to be held accountable. Such is the situation with our government. Again, after I get through this, you're going to be understanding why I think there's going to be a lot more calls for Joe Biden to resign over the failure of decision-making in this Afghanistan situation. By August, the dominant view was that the Taliban wasn't likely to pose a serious threat to Kabul until late fall. Again, hindsight 2020, that wasn't true at all. That was dead wrong. American officials may have been urging Ghani to show greater urgency, but their own actions suggested no immediate cause for alarms. The United States said, hey, well, you need to be urgent about this, but didn't do anything to support that claim. Officials surrendering to the customary rhythms of Washington in August. This is your DC insider sentence. Washington kind of shuts down in August. Congress goes home. The president goes on vacation. The White House staff goes on vacation. Everything is totally fine in August. And this article says the officials surrendered to the customary rhythms of Washington in August. On Friday afternoon, before Kabul fell, the White House was starting to empty out as many of the senior staff prepared to take their first vacations of Biden's young presidency. Old man, young presidency. Earlier in the day, Biden had arrived at Camp David. The Secretary of State, Anthony Blinken, was already in the Hamptons. Must be nice being a public servant, being able to go to the Hamptons. But Saturday, the fall of Mazar al-Sharif, a site of furious battles between pro and anti-Taliban forces in the 90s, convinced U.S. officials they needed to start to scramble. How quickly was a subject of dispute between the Pentagon and the State Department. So everybody goes on vacation. White House staff, Joe Biden goes to Camp David, Anthony Blinken goes to the Hamptons. Everybody's on vacation. Then all of a sudden on Saturday, this major battlefield gets completely overrun by the Taliban, and everyone goes, holy crap, we have a problem. Everybody starts to come back from vacation, and now there's disputes between the Pentagon and the State Department because everybody's flabbergasted. Oh, no, we were told the Afghans have 6 months before the Taliban take Kabul. We were expecting late fall. Again, if they were wrong, somebody needs to resign. If they were lying, somebody needs to resign. One of those two things were happening. Somebody needs to resign or get fired. Heads have to roll over this. Saturday evening, Kabul time, Ghani and Blinken spoke by phone. So the president of Afghanistan and the Secretary of State spoke by phone, hoping to avert a showdown in the capital. Blinken sought Ghani's support for a U.S. brokered arrangement with the Taliban in which militants would remain outside of Kabul if the Afghan leader would step aside for an interim government takeover. So Blinken was saying, look, they're coming, and we need to form some sort of negotiating strategy to get them to stay outside the walls of Kabul. This is on Saturday evening. Remember, they took Kabul on Sunday. The day before, Secretary Blinken was saying, we need to figure out some sort of plan. Ghani, we'll read on. The aim, said a senior U.S. official, was to buy more time for negotiations aimed at forming an inclusive government that involved the Taliban. So at this point, the United States and the Afghan government was saying, shoot, they came way quicker than we thought. The U.S. intelligence was wrong. The Afghan president was lying. And the Taliban moved quicker than anybody would have thought. So the idea was, well, Ghani, if you can involve the Taliban in your government in some way, shape, or form, maybe they won't take the Taliban. Terrible position to be in. We didn't have to be in that position. We didn't have to. It was a failure of intelligence or people lying. In both cases, somebody should resign. President Ghani reluctantly agreed. This portion of the article entitled President Gone. The friend reported, I think the government collapsed. He rushed to the airport wanting to see for himself as the exodus began, with pilots and crews rushing to board planes and get airborne from the country suddenly confronted with a vacuum. The U.S. officials were surprised as anybody. They were just shocked. Best intelligence in the world, best military in the world. We were just shocked. Americans had expected Ghani would stay for an orderly transition to an interim authority as the agreement and the negotiators in Doha had struck. News of Ghani's departure received secondhand meant that the hope had been crushed. He had not only abandoned the country, but he had unraveled the security situation in Kabul, said a senior official. People just simply melted away from the airport and everywhere else. In the void, so again, Ghani leaves Afghanistan. In the void, law and order began to break down with reports of armed gangs moving through the streets. So the president of Afghanistan, President Ghani, fled the country, and a total breakdown of the Afghan government started, to the complete shock and surprise of the United States of America. Again, the most powerful, influential military and country on the planet didn't have good intelligence to show that this was going to happen. Now, did anybody expect Ghani to just bounce? No, probably not. But no contingency plan was in place. And this is the crux of this entire article. This is where it gets insane. Literally insane. And this is the part where I think people are going to start calling for Joe Biden to resign for this decision right here. Now, again, the U.S. official, I want to reiterate this. In the void, law and order began to break down in the city of Kabul, with reports of armed gangs moving through the streets. In a hastily arranged in-person meeting, U.S. senior military leaders in Doha, including McKenzie, the commander of U.S. Central Command, spoke with Abdul Ghani Barbadar, head of the Taliban's political wing. Barbadar said, "We have a problem. We have two options to deal with it. You, the United States military, take responsibility for securing Kabul, or you have to allow us to do it." The leader and the head of the political wing of the Taliban told the United States, because Kabul is being overrun with crime right now because the government is now gone, the head of the Taliban said, there's a problem in Kabul. You need to deal with it, or we need to deal with it. It gave us the option. The Taliban gave us the option to deal with this problem or to let them deal with the problem. Seems like a pretty clear option if you think about it for a second. Does it mean reinforcing troops in Afghanistan? Yes. But we'd at least have control of the city and allow people to get out. United States citizens, Afghan people that helped us throughout the world, or throughout the last 20 years, we would at least have control of the city. Would it cost? Yes, of course it would cost. But it's either take control of the city ourselves or let the Taliban do it. Throughout the day, President Joe Biden had remained resolute in his decision to withdraw all American troops from Afghanistan. The collapse of the Afghan government hadn't changed his mind. McKenzie, aware of those orders, told Barbadar that the U.S. mission was only to evacuate American citizens, Afghan allies, and others at risk. The United States, he told Barbadar, needed the airport to do that. On the spot, an understanding was reached, according to the two other U.S. officials. The United States could have the airport until August 31st, but the Taliban would control the city. That's it. That decision right there, Joe Biden's decision to, according to this Washington Post article, remain resolute in wanting all Americans out, and that not changing from the time the Afghan government collapsed, is why you're going to see calls for him to resign, and rightly so. Just to reiterate one more time, when the Afghan government left, the city of Kabul completely went into chaos. armed gangs roving the streets, crime going crazy through the roof. And the Taliban said to us, somebody has to take control of the situation. Either we can do it or you can do it. The United States said you can do it. The most powerful, influential military and country on the planet trusted the Taliban to take control of Kabul. And that's exactly what they did. There could not have been a more wrong decision in this. And again, unfortunately, it's not surprising. Joe Biden has made the wrong decision in pretty much every situation regarding foreign policy throughout his entire political career. But this one takes the cake. Obviously, of course, after this decision, you see exactly what happened. You see the Taliban set up checkpoints, not letting people get into the airport. The United States having to go back into the airport and take back control of the airport. You see people not being able to get through. You saw the attack that happened outside the airport. All of this could have been avoided. All of it could have been avoided if Joe Biden decided that the United States would take control of Kabul instead of the Taliban. His decision was to trust the Taliban over the United States military. And what has happened over the course of the last 2.5 weeks has been a result of that decision. 13 U.S. military service members dead in an attack. Thousands of people left stranded in Afghanistan. People beaten in the streets. All of that is fallout from this decision from the President of the United States, who has shown time and again that he is not capable of doing the job of Commander-in-Chief. The Taliban took control of the city. Fighters were now on the move throughout Kabul. The group's spokesman issued a revision of his earlier guidance. The Taliban hadn't intended to take Kabul that day, but Ghani's exit gave the group no choice. I would add a phrase into that sentence. Ghani's exit and the United States' unwillingness to protect U.S. citizens, Afghan